I would like to welcome Dr. Sarosh Kumar Jha, who is the Global Director for Water Practice at the World Bank Group and who will be presenting our keynote today. Sarosh Kumar Jha is the Global Director at the World Bank's Group for Water Global Practice. In his current assignment, he has been a core member of the GP senior team, which drives policy direction at the GP. He oversees a portfolio of about $24 billion worth in water-related investments. He's involved in analytical work, engages with multiple donors and their trust funds, and also is heavily involved in global partnerships. Sarosh Kumar Jha also supports an integrated approach to water security, which include service delivery that is inclusive, water delivery, which is aimed at providing accelerated action related to climate and issues of water security. Interlinking to this is the question of food security, which is executed in Dr. Jha's activities through the World Bank's Global Water Strategy. This strategy is aimed at providing policy advice and operational support to specific country needs at the country level. Prior to his current appointment, Dr. Jha was a World Bank Regional Director in the Middle East Department, Senior Director for Fragility, Conflict, and Violence Global Practice at the World Bank Group, and he has also held various other positions, primarily across the Asian continent. He also served as the World Bank's Global Manager for Disaster Risk Management Practice and as a head of the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery, GFDRR, which he founded in 2006. Since joining the World Bank Group in 2005 as a senior infrastructure specialist and in the Sustainable Development Network. He holds a breadth of experience on water security issues and related topics, and we are very glad to have him here to present our keynote. And therefore, Dr. Jha, I hand over to you.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and my apologies again for being late. I was held up in a very important meeting with regard to the COP27, which is happening in a few days' time, and this involved a number of countries from East Asia and Pacific region. So my apologies, but I really want to thank you for inviting me to be part of this. And as Professor Vinod Menon knows, I have a huge admiration for people who work on emergencies, Vinod himself being one of them. But also listening to Ria's presentation, which I really enjoyed, because people working with the communities, especially vulnerable communities, I think they are the ones really delivering huge public goods. So let me make a few remarks on the topic that you asked me to speak, given the mandate I have now. So first, the importance of connecting water with climate and development, as we call connecting the drops. We need to recognize, and it is scientifically established, that the changing climate is fundamentally disrupting the hydrological cycle, the water cycle, which will have a significant impact, and it is having a significant impact on food and energy security, and more broadly on economy, people, and environment. The second, this is happening at a time when the world is already facing multiple overlapping crises. And as a result, we are seeing increase in poverty. If you had seen the World Bank's recent report, what we call Poverty and Shared Prosperity, as a result of COVID-19 and the ongoing crisis worldwide, the bank is projecting increase in poverty for the first time in many, many years. In addition to, of course, the poverty crisis, we have the debt crisis. Countries have very large debt. You have issues of lack of nutritional stunting, learning losses. Many children who've been in the school or not been in the school because of COVID-19 have lost very precious years of learning. And this will have a very long-term generational impact. So we all need to be very, very concerned in terms of how all this crisis intersect and the role we all can play. Now, in addition to the crisis I mentioned, the water is also in a crisis. And the reason I say this is that it is again, the scientists have said recently that the humanity, we have transgressed the freshwater planetary boundary, which means that the recycle of generation of freshwater flows in the planetary boundary. Now we are basically consuming more than the regeneration. And as a result, we have, for the first time in many thousands of years, we have changed that balance. So the humanity's modification of the water cycle has pushed the world beyond safe operating space for continued life on Earth. And so the status quo is not an option. Of course, water is also the most essential human need and is very critical for development, growth, and resilience. Clean water, safe sanitation, and good hygiene are very necessary to achieve positive health outcomes. As the WHO report says, that water is the most fundamental determinant of public health outcome. And therefore, water is very critical even for public health. Yet, 1/4 of the world's population, about 2 billion people, lack safe drinking water. And half of the world's population, 3.6 billion people, lack safe sanitation. The damage to human capital as a result of lack of access to safe drinking water and sanitation is staggering. In 2019 alone, the diarrheal diseases were ranked the 8th greatest cause of death in the world, claiming about 1.5 million lives worldwide, mostly due to poor water and sanitation. The burden is particularly harsh in women and girls. For example, the lack of personal hygiene facilities in schools leads to school absenteeism with lifelong repercussions from learning losses. For every dollar invested in basic drinking water, there are at least $3 in returns and even higher figures for water investments in rural areas. Water is important for production, with farming accounting for 23% of GDP in sub-Saharan Africa, for example. Water is also key for hydropower, mining, industry. And importantly, 90% of the climate events are water related. So better water management is key for climate adaptation and resilience. Despite the proven benefits of investing in water for development, water security, which is simply about the availability of sufficient water, is far from being realized in many countries. The COVID-19 pandemic has underscored critical gaps in water and sanitation services with serious consequences for public health. The challenge is particularly acute in Africa, where poor water quality is the root cause of 70 to 80% of diseases. Droughts and floods are becoming more intense. Groundwater is drying up, and cities and farms face huge water shortages. Climate change multiplies the threat of water insecurity and presents itself through water. Higher temperatures change precipitation patterns, rising sea levels, increasing frequency of cloudburst, melting glaciers, floods, droughts, and hurricanes. So looking forward, against this backdrop, there is a need for coordinated, urgent, global and local action in the water sector and broadly on 3 fronts. First, enhance policy and institutional reforms. Second, increase public and private investments. And third, very importantly, greater participation of all stakeholders in this agenda. Policy and institutional reforms are vital to enable sustainable and equitable water use, valuing water properly, and improve service delivery. The negative impacts of climate change on water could be neutralized with better policy decisions, with some regions standing to improve their growth rates by up to 6% with better water resource management. Enhanced policy and institutional reforms are also needed to deliver universal safe water and sanitation and support climate change adaptation. Water institutions such as river basin agencies, utilities, and municipalities are crucial for implementation but they are often hampered by weak capacity and unclear mandates. Cross-border cooperation on water is essential. There are 310 transboundary river basins and more than 500 transboundary aquifers around the world. By 2050, 50 to 100% more people would live in water-stressed transboundary basins compared to today. Around 2/3 of the world's transboundary rivers and many more aquifers do not have a cooperative water management framework. Focused policy measures and better institutions can enable sustainable and equitable water use, value water properly, and deliver services to more people more efficiently. These measures will require strong political leadership to create the economic, social, and the mindset changes that are needed to better manage water resources and deliver services efficiently to more people. Increased public and private investment will be critical for tackling water security. Only public finances cannot meet the financing gap that we have for water security and sanitation. The investment needs will increase sixfold from current levels between now and 2030, and there has to be greater effort in mobilizing private capital for water security and sanitation. Let me quickly turn to the greater citizens' participation. For all these efforts to succeed in changing climate, greater citizens' participation is needed at all levels to transform how we use, share, save, and prevent water waste and value water. For example, in Senegal, the World Bank is supporting farmers to work with irrigation agencies to establish climate-smart, solar-powered irrigation systems and rehabilitate water mobilization schemes. This is helping increase efficiency and production, reduce risk, create jobs, and boost income for the farmers. We must act now to protect people, livelihoods, and resources. This means strengthening safety nets to cover water shocks, building resilience to enhance storage solutions, and redesigning our cities to improve the way water is managed. Water-induced crises can provide opportunities for change and highlight the urgency. As to the World Bank itself, and it was mentioned in my introduction, which was very generous of the chair for that introduction. The World Bank has a very, very large program in helping developing countries work on rights and the policies and institutions, and of course, build a much more stronger foundation for water security and sanitation across the country. Our current portfolio is about $30 billion roughly. And this year we will be providing a lot more financing to countries as part of the World Bank Group's Climate Change Action Plan. But clearly this is an area of our priority because climate crisis to a very large extent is water crisis. And therefore, it is very important that all stakeholders, particularly civil society, private sector, governments, and IFIs such as the World Bank, we really work together. And we are very keen that as we move into the COP27 happening next month and the UN Water Conference March 2023, which will be happening after more than 40 plus years first time, we really put forward a very ambitious agenda of action to move towards greater water security and closing the gap in terms of access to safe drinking water and sanitation, especially for vulnerable communities. So let me close here by thanking once again the organizers for giving me the opportunity. It's been really a pleasure to be part of this very august gathering. And again, my admiration to all of you working on emergencies throughout the world who are connected to this very important conference. And please count on World Bank. If any support in any countries you're working, please reach out to the World Bank and we'll be happy to really collaborate wherever there are opportunities. So back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for the very nice presentation and thank you for taking the time to join us. I know you're with the big meetings you have coming up, your timetable must be really tight and busy. So we really appreciate that. There's a couple of questions that have come up. So the first one is from Professor Vinod, which came up in the chat that I'm going to quickly mention. Dr. Sarah Jakumar, the question is, what are your suggestions for addressing the challenges of water security, energy security, and food security in an integrated manner?
First, I think at the policy level, there is a need for better collaboration among the ministries responsible for energy, agriculture, and water, which is not the case in many countries. So we would really like to see a greater coordination. And I think climate crisis can be really the motivation for these agencies to really work together. And we are seeing that now in many countries as part of the government's NDCs, which is the nationally determined contributions as part of the Paris Agreement and the long-term strategies. The countries are really coming together, what we call the nexus of energy, water, and agriculture. They are working together. The second, the more practically, is about investing in what I would call integrated water resource management, where you manage your water resources, both the surface water, the groundwater, and the runoff from precipitations during the seasonal rains. You manage the water resources in such a way that you build adequate storage, which helps you to irrigate for food security, which helps you to generate hydropower as part of the energy transition in the countries. So this is just one example of how you can really prioritize building more water storage structures to deal with the hydrological variability, so that when it rains, you are able to store, and when it doesn't rain, you are able to use your stored water for irrigation or running the hydropower facilities. And we are coming out in the next 2 weeks with a global report on storage. And storage, these are not just built structures. It could be nature-based solutions. It could be using landscape in such a way that you're storing more water and reducing the runoff and sedimentation. So the report that is coming out in 2 weeks' time essentially is going to talk about how the global water storage capacity has declined over time, either because we are not investing enough, or we are not maintaining these structures, or there is just too much sedimentation in the structures. You have less water. So when it doesn't rain because of hydrological variability, you have a drought situation in the regions, and there is no crop production, or the crop loss is very high. So there are measures which could be taken essentially to connect food security with energy transition and water security. And storage, we think, is a very big part of that. Many countries are investing in dams, other kind of structures. And we are going to encourage governments to build more water storage structures. And it doesn't have to be big structures. It could be small, nature-based solutions as well. Landscape management, watershed management, conserve and store as much water as possible. The second is the water losses in the system, the inefficiencies. Our data shows that the water losses in a very inefficient water distribution system is good enough to produce food for 81 million people. So if we are able to save water, let's say, in the way we consume today in our irrigation system, in our water supply system, if you just save that water, we can grow food for 81 million people, which just shows that there is tremendous scope to improve the efficiency of water systems, which can really contribute to growing more production. The three is the use of solar in pumping, irrigation, and storage. There was a time when we used to basically, the water sector was very energy intensive, and we were using fossil fuel-based power. All that can be replaced now using renewables, using solar power. And India is a good example where solar power is coming on a very large scale, especially in the irrigation sector. And we are encouraging this. I just mentioned Senegal example. In more and more countries, we are encouraging use of solar for growing food. And finally, I think the food security cannot be just because the way we grow our crops. I think there has to be a much more focus on productivity and income for the farmers, and looking at what crops will bring more returns when you combine the irrigation fees you pay on water along with the value you get for the crop when you sell it to the farmers. So I think there has to be a more discussion on water efficiency and productivity for the farmers as part of one decision-making process. And we are seeing that in most countries where we work, increasingly, there is focus on not just on productivity for the farmers, but also water efficiency, because water is finite. So if you do not really save water, do not conserve water, then there is no sustainability, and you will basically reach a time when there will be no water left, what we call day zero scenario. There are many cities in the world which are approaching day zero scenario when there is no water left in the city. Therefore, there has to be much more thinking, advanced planning, building right institutions, encourage the culture of conservation and saving, and take a more kind of holistic approach in managing water, agri, food, and energy security issues. So it's a great question, and I hope it gives you some food for thought as we address this issue.
Yes, I agree. Speaking from actually personal experience, partly, Cape Town was one of the first publicized cities in the world which came very close, and I can't really say that the situation in South Africa has really improved that much. We are currently sitting in a city where major infrastructure problems and the breakdowns of the infrastructure you mentioned actually resulted on the fact that we have power cuts, and concurrently with that, water only supplied one every 3 days. And then the other 2 days, they are basically trying to keep the system from collapsing. Large metropolitan area, which is double the size of Cape Town, which is currently Johannesburg, is facing water cuts on the level that has been unseen for various decades. So, and I really like the mentioning and the push that the World Bank is doing for storage of water, because it is the unpredictability of rain. We have seen that exacerbate a very long drought where basically since 2015, 3 of the main dams that supply the city I'm in have actually dried up and have become pasture lands. And we have actually transferred from drought into the aridification stage. We can't actually look at it as if though we are in drought anymore. And so I just wanted to ask one more question before we consider the handing over to the next speaker, and that was prior to the COP26 meetings, there was a lot of talk about carbon neutrality and the need for urgent action to achieve commitments and put us on a path where we would be reaching that goal very quickly or the fastest possible way. I just wanted to quickly get some of your thoughts or opinions on how do you think the current geopolitical situation and the shifts that have happened in 2022, do they put this goal in jeopardy? And if so, or in a broader sense, what do you think are the cascading effects of the carbon neutrality and the lack of achievement of the goals that are being set on water security around the world? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that is generally, this concern is shared by many people globally, including us. And because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the impact it had on the more broadly the energy security issues in Europe and elsewhere, it has created those concerns. But overall, globally, every single country remains committed to the Paris Agreement. And we at the World Bank, for example, we have committed that from July 1, 2023, we will only finance those projects worldwide which are fully Paris aligned. That is the policy decision which has been taken by our president and the board. The second is that there is more financing being made available for energy transition from fossil fuel to clean energy, mostly renewables, but also more financing going for adaptation. Water is a big part of that, flood forecasting, early warning systems, storage structures, better irrigation. And and also building more climate smart agriculture systems in the countries. So more financing also going for adaptation. This year alone, I mean, the fiscal year that just passed, we did more than $35 billion roughly for climate related financing alone. We intend to do more this year, and because there's a demand also from the countries. And now, will all this be enough to really ensure that we avoid a situation of 2 degrees by 2050, 1.5 degrees by 2050, and 2 degrees by the end of this century? No, I think more will have to be done. I think this is essentially more to do with the greenhouse gases emission. This has to be reduced. The path to net zero has to be accelerated, but that is not going to be cheap. It's going to cost a lot of money. And that is where the big discussion is happening globally. As an institution, we are being asked to do more than what we are doing now. And yesterday we had our internal meeting of all the directors, with our president and MD, and this is very much on the table to see, can we really come up with more new ideas to mobilize more financing to really help accelerate the energy transition in the countries which are large emitters, polluters, etc. Now, this is the developing countries where we work, but this is as part of the burden sharing responsibilities. All countries will have to really work together, and then only we'll see the results. The last thing I also wanted to mention on this topic is that while the path to net zero is going to be very, very challenging, we have to keep pushing, because our experience has been that many things that we considered very difficult and impossible to do till recently, there has been a breakthrough in technology and innovation, which has made these things possible. I'll just give you an example of desalination in countries which did not have much water, and they started relying on desalination for drinking water and also for irrigation. Till 5 years back, desalination was considered a very expensive proposition that people cannot afford. But because of new technologies, because of use of renewable, desal certainly has become a viable option for countries which do not have enough water. So there is this ongoing research and innovation that is happening in countries, both in developing countries and the advanced economies. I remain very optimistic that we will be able to see more breakthroughs, let's say, in battery technology. Can we store enough? Because there's so much sunlight around the world, just for example. So if there's more breakthroughs in technologies such as storage, battery storage, water storage, use of synthetic fertilizers so that you don't emit any methane, changing the irrigation practices. So I think the innovation that's happening currently is going to be game changing if we really are able to come up with new technologies in the way the climate agenda is managed. So I remain very, very optimistic on this, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for that answer. I see that our next set of speakers are going to be ready shortly. So there's just 2 more comments in the QA. Let me just quickly see if I can touch on them, and after that we can proceed with our program. So from Cherchak Virapat, from the policy to comprehensive actions for climate actions and water resource management, it may not be not achieved, as they will need to deal with so many local communities in different countries. Knowledge management platforms will be required to provide adequate best practices and adaptive management to them. What do you think about this point?
I think I absolutely agree with the point on climate action is going to be, to a very large extent, on the adaptation side, it is local. And working with local communities is extremely important. And as part of the World Bank finance projects, we are increasingly relying on local communities led adaptation plans that are supported by the bank finance projects. So they will have a very central role to play. This is also the case in many national climate change strategies we have seen where the local communities, local bodies are given a very important role. Access to knowledge and good practices for action. I think these initiatives do exist in many countries globally as well. There are so many good organizations which make these tools available to local communities, local organizations. This morning here, I was meeting EcoPeace, which works on Palestine, Israel, and Jordan, primarily promoting green and blue agenda. They have a huge network of local organizations they work with. So that's a good model in terms of how we can identify organizations which have the capacity to really provide knowledge and best practices in local language to local communities. And I think there is a role for organizations like us, for example, to support such organizations. And that's something we would like to work going forward. As part of the work that we are doing on water sector globally, we intend to set up a global network of civil society organizations in water, so that we are able to continue this two-way dialogue and stay fully engaged with what's going on the ground, which can help shape World Bank's policies and financing for water for climate. So we will be making those announcements at the COP to set up such mechanism, which we will finance. And we're trying to do something similar with the young people around the world, the youth, because we also think that the youth need to play, and they would like to play a very important role because this matters to them. This is about them as much as it is about us. So they have a very high stake in the process. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for taking the time to present your keynote. It is very much appreciated. It was a really interesting discussion and also a lot of really useful points that were brought across. We will leave it there, and thank you very much once again. We look forward to engaging with your institution and also yourself personally. I know that from the viewpoint of the Global South, it is very critical that we continue exchanging the knowledge and also follow the best practices that we know that the World Bank has championed around the world for a really long time. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us, and we look forward to seeing you in the future again.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Goodbye.
Thank you.